Hi,
Hey.
welcome. Hi, Charles. Hi, Yvonne. Good to be
Hello,
here with
Rina.
Hello.
you. Charles,
Hello. Well, welcome to today's TBQ Live. If you've seen the show before, then welcome back. However, if you're new here, I'll quickly go over what this podcast is all about. Videocast. This installment comes out every second and fourth Tuesday every month, where we talk about a wide array of things, ranging from management and leadership skills to ancient Ayurveda practices to applied neuroscience. TBQ is based on the 9 levers in Rena's book, the brilliance quotients, hence the acronym TBQ. There is something for everyone as we take a science-based approach through the art of leadership in an unpredictable era. With your host Rena, executive coach and leadership accelerator, Maria, neuro leadership facilitator and coach, and to guide you through the topics. This week, we have a special guest in, Yvonne, to provide us some unique insight in today's topic. I'd like to pass you on to Rena for any further disruption.
thank you so much, Charles. Always a joy to have you open up TBQ for us. And
Thank you.
you reminded me when you talked about the book on which TBQ is kind of based. And when I was writing the last chapter of the book with a wonderful lady who co-authored with me called Geraldine, who is the founder of an executive coaching consultancy company, we knew that we were coming up with the final ninth lever, which would be game changing for leaders. And it was all about purposeful leaders. So I'm absolutely delighted that we are getting an opportunity today to talk with Yvonne on this particular topic. And as the question goes out there, are purposeful leaders more transformational? And the answer is yes. It's a resounding yes. Purposeful leaders are more transformational. But the question is why? Why is it that purposeful leaders can be more transformational in the way that they lead themselves, their teams, their businesses, and really change the communities and sectors that they operate in? What happens in the brain when purpose is clear is something that we're going to answer today. We're also going to be talking about how does it impact when we engage our stakeholders, our career, our business, when our purpose and values are clear. There's a significant change and difference that takes place, and it helps leaders not just lead differently, it allows them to reframe some strategic and key topics that business leaders are asking themselves each day. And today we are going to be talking about one very such topic with Yvonne. Now, I'm absolutely delighted that Yvonne has joined us. She's the founder and managing director of Curado Care Home, also the award winning director of the year for sustainability with the IOD, and has many, many other accomplishments. I'm absolutely delighted that she's also the business mentor to the Ascent Leadership Mastery program that we'll be touching upon just a little bit. And she's such an amazing living example, and her story always inspires and informs me. So, Yvonne, absolutely delighted that you have joined us today. Welcome.
Thank you, Rina. And thank you for the grand introduction.
It is the truth. What can I say? But hey, let's listen from you a little bit about the work that you do, your business. Tell us a little bit more about that, Yvonne.
Okay, so as you said, I am the co founder of Curado, which started in 2009. And Curado is a provider of residential care for adults with mental health needs. So, what that means is we are a care home, but we are a care home for people aged 18 to 65 with various mental illnesses from schizophrenia, bipolar affective disorder, depression. And these are adults who are coming from hospital based settings and transitioning into the community. So we provide that medium for them to gain the skills to become more independent. So our patients or residents, as we call them, are not long staying as in care homes for the elderly. They're usually with us for about 18 to 24 months. And after that time, they are seen as being able to cope more on their own, so they can step down and live in their own accommodation or maybe one with less support. So that is what Curado does in a nutshell. We're based in Sutton in Surrey. We have a 20 strong workforce, and we are an Investors in People accredited organization. We started with one service and now we have four, one of which is recently opened. So it's taken a while to get there, but slowly but surely we have got to where we've wanted to. And that's who we are.
Fantastic, absolutely great. And it was just reminding me that 2009 is when you started off this business. And lo and behold, 10 years later, there's such a demand on a topic which has probably had a lot of stigma attached to it in earlier days, which is all about mental illness and how we can be, far more mentally, now, well, what's the right word for it? Much more healthier. So it's a great space that you are operating in. And what's quite interesting is that with the demand kind of that's gone up over a period of time, and now we know it's so essential. Something happened interestingly when we met up almost 10 years after you launched your business. And I think we met up in 2018. And I'm almost recollecting the time when we had a conversation in one, which turned out to be one of our favorite bars at King's Cross Station, and talked a little bit about, what your purpose was at that moment of time and what is it that you wanted to do. So come back, take us back to that time, because there was an interesting transition and inflection
Yes,
phase
that's
at that
right.
moment of time. So tell us a bit more about what was happening in your head when we
Yes.
connected. Over to you on that
I
one.
will. I will. Gosh, you've got a good memory, Rena. King's Cross was a regular haunt for us after our initial meeting, which I remember was in a lunch queue at the Institute of Directors, as we attended a seminar then, and we just bumped into each other, had this very electrifying conversation. And because our time was limited, we said, oh, we must meet up, we must meet up. And that's how it all started. So I remember now 2018 is a year that Curado had done quite a lot. So we became investors in people accredited in April of that year. And then we started a graduate management program in October of that year. And then in November, we had just launched our leadership academy, which was just before I met you. So where Curado was and I was that come 2019, we really need to be thinking about developing our leadership capability and high performance, as we had ticked a lot of boxes in my mind, but I didn't think it was collectively building that kind of capability that I was looking for. So that's where we were at that time.
Absolutely. And I recollect that conversation you also talked about as we dug deeper into what is it that you wanted to do when you're trying to build up your capabilities of your
Yes,
team as well as of the business, is to actually start thinking about expansion.
yes,
There was a
yes,
business need, of course, at that moment of time, because there was going to be a demand for more people who
yes.
would want the kind of support that your organization offers to empower their lives. And so
Mm,
you were like, I see my business expanding and I want my team to grow with me.
yes,
That was really the purpose that was kind of becoming clearer in your mind in our
yes.
conversation. What I recollect. Would you say
Yeah,
that was right?
yeah, actually, you're right, Rena. That was the whole point of building leadership capability, because after we opened Unit 2, I could see the challenges that we experienced in opening a second unit. On a business plan, it all looks great. If it works for one, then you just replicate it. But when you're dealing with human beings, it's not a mathematical formula. So I realized very quickly that in order to have a sustainable business in a way that had grown in a good way, because we started well, we had to go back to the drawing board and look at what makes this person tick. How will you get that high performance if you open unit 3 and unit 4 when you're not there? So it was really a foundational issue that I thought needed to be worked on in order for us to be able to expand the way we wanted to.
Absolutely. And I recollect another part of our conversation now that you're sharing the details, because we talked about, because obviously the work that I do, and when we had that introduction, was about working with teams and with top leaders. And I remember this conversation about saying, hey, how about doing some executive coaching for you to create your space to grow as a leader and that of the team. And you were like, wait a minute, I first would like to invest in my team and bring about that change. And then I'm going to invest in myself so that the team is almost bumped up to that next level of capability and capacity, so that when you want to kind of fly higher, the team's there to kind of take on the brunt of far wider spectrum of work. So I remember that as well,
Yes, yes, yes,
isn't it? And it's
yeah.
quite interesting because when you are sharing it out to me, and one of the things I'd love to bring up right now is this whole conversation around purpose. And there's a
Mm,
lot of work that I do with leaders and teams on purpose. And often there is a misnomer about what purpose is, because some people feel that purpose has to be something which is grandiose, which, well, could be the case. It could be like changing the community, changing the sector, bringing about change in the world. But for some people, purpose might be far more, what is it that I'm going to do in the next couple of years? I want to grow my business, I want to expand it, and that will become the gateway to be able to influence the wider world. And for some people, purpose might be, hey, I want to be looking after my family and making sure that there's food on the table. The interesting thing, however, that happens, and I'd like to spend a few minutes right now for a wonderful audience before we go deeper into the impact of what purpose does, is what happens. What's the science behind it? Why is it that we invite leaders and teams to become far more clearer about their purpose? Because there's something magical that happens in the brain. And what's in the brain are a few things. So, one is when we get clear about our purpose and the intention. So, for example, in Yvonne's case, she's talking about the intention about, I want to grow my business, I want to grow my team. That's an intention that's set up. And it's aligned to the purpose as well, about being able to create a bigger ripple effect in the whole mental well being space as well, right? There's an interesting, it ignites literally what we call neuro pathways in the brain. And so here are some interesting facts internally that makes a leader far more transformational in their choices and behaviors going forward. So one is what the brain loves. One of the things that actually makes a brain more effective is simplicity. Once it gets clear about what is it that I want to do, it starts almost focusing and supporting what we call brain lateralization, which is basically debunking the myth that we used to say that the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain, one is more analytical, the other is more creative. That's a myth that's been debunked by neuroscientists now, because what the brain does is lateralization, which means it picks up and connects with different parts of the brain and helps the individual to make choices and to do something known as priming. So having clarity about one's intention and purpose gives the brain that focus, and it knows, all right, what parts of the brain must I connect so that I can help achieve this focus. The other thing that happens with intention is this word that I've used called priming. And there are two things that the brain does. When it knows the direction of travel, it starts doing two things. One is what we call selective filtering, and the other is value tagging, which means at any point of time, our brain is being bombarded with millions of stimuli and lots of choices of what we can do in life and new ideas that we can do with business. But because it's clear about the direction of travel, it starts doing a filtering process of absorbing and bringing to conscious awareness things that are important that will make the purpose and intention come to life. And it also starts value tagging of saying, okay, that choice is actually going to help me, and gives it an added value so that you feel that you can make a choice. And all we do is make a choice, but the brain has done something known as filtering and value tagging. So it starts helping us decide and make choices which is aligned to our purpose. So that's another interesting thing, why an individual becomes far more energized as well and starts making the right choices. And talking about energized, what it actually does is, because purpose is connected to emotions, to values, to intuition, it gets the anabolic, what we call often anabolic energy. And people who have attended TBQ Live learn a lot about anabolic energy. It triggers of anabolic energy in a positive way, and it triggers behavioral change. So not only are we making better choices aligned to purpose, we're now changing our behaviors almost unconsciously so that we can operate in a far more transformational way. And then last but not the least, and that's the last bit of science before we go into some more of the application, is it does something known as neuroplasticity. That means when the purpose and intention is clear, the brain, because now it's primed up, it's doing value tagging, filtering, it's getting the right emotions and the right kind of energy pumping through the body itself, it becomes in a far better space to be neuroplastic, i.e., making new synaptic connections in the brain, which kind of helps us broaden our current skill base. It starts doing myelination, which means current choices that are working for us to deliver our purpose almost starts getting a stronger sheath. Myelination is like a sheath, like if you think about an electric cable, and there's an insulation sheath on top of it so that the electric impulse can move faster. So that becomes stronger. and neurogenesis, i.e., new neuron and new connections start taking place. So there's wonderful thing that starts happening internally, which is why leaders start operating at a far higher level, and they're far more transformational in the impact that they do. And so that's the kind of science that I just want to share with you and take us very seamlessly into another conversation with Yvonne on this one, is that when we're talking about per se the entire purpose driven leadership, that is often what we talked about, I'd love you to talk about one of the things that you did with your business, which is around strengths. But before that, I'd love you to talk a little bit about your core values, Yvonne, and a bit of a reflection about how did that drive some of the decisions that you took as a leader at that moment of time, or does even today for that matter.
It's a good question. I'm still digesting what you just said about purpose, which is very interesting as well. My core values are authenticity, wisdom, happiness, family, and meaningful work. So, in terms of decision making, because those are the things that drive me, if I'm in a situation that maybe I find it's not meaningful, it's not something that's going to encourage me to say, okay, let's go for that, whatever it is, project, for example. So I think by virtue of my values, that's almost like a base where it magnetizes me to things, or it will repel me away from things. That I think, and I think that's for most people. They may not have been able to define it like that in such a granular way, but usually you're driven by the things that drive you, and
Yes.
you're driven by the things that you're drawn to,
Yes.
and I think that's linked to purpose as well. I know one very famous Baptist leader said, "In pursuit of your passion, you find your purpose." So it's the things that make you happy or interested. That's what, yeah.
So true. And you're absolutely right on the aspect about core values, because are really who we are.
Mm,
And sometimes I find that people unconsciously are making choices towards supporting or protecting their values. And there are some people who do it purposefully.
yes,
And when people do it purposefully, it's exactly the point that you said about, when it's meaningful work, you kind of make choices. It's value tagging. That's what the brain is doing.
yes, yes.
Saying, oh, actually, that's meaningful work. So
Hmm.
let me kind of say yes to it. So values, you're absolutely right, is fundamental to values. And somebody actually has made a statement that their life's purpose is to find their life's purpose. But what they were doing is actually at least living their values. So that helps to be able to live a life which leads to fulfillment. A
Sure.
brilliant on that one. Thank you so much for sharing that. So one of the things that we did now that we were unwrapping the package of working with your team after our wonderful meeting and conversations at King Cross, and having a good understanding about what your purpose and intention is,
Hmm.
so we did a lot around team values. We also did some work with you, which we'll cover in a bit. But one of my all-time favorite topics was the work that we did with strengths,
Yes.
if you recollect, which is, of course, a fantastic tool which helps people understand what their realized and unrealized strengths are, which are natural, and helps them flip the coin and
Hmm.
focus on what they're good at rather than what they're not good at, which is often what we are trained to do when we're growing up, which is fix the problem, fix your weaknesses, and this flips the coin. So I would love you to kind of share a bit from, as a business leader,
Hmm.
why you chose that. What did you see differently after you deployed that intervention? And perhaps a little bit about how did you go about then embellisher after the work we did? So I know there are many layers to the question, so I'm just going to let you reflect a little bit on all of those questions.
You said why we chose it, what we saw different, and then how it was embedded in our culture. Okay. So we chose Strength Finder because it's something that you recommended, Rena. But in spite of that, we looked at it and we thought that this would be a good way to really hone in on the strengths of each person, because we were looking for high performance, and we were trying to develop a leadership culture, which is why we launched the Leadership Academy. So we were looking for leadership effectiveness and capability to increase. So that's why we chose StrengthsFinder. Now, what we found after that was that colleagues were immediately uplifted as they had done this, course. Because they were delighted to discover their natural abilities. Some of them they weren't even aware of, and that gave them the confidence and the motivation to want to do more, not just in the workplace, but also in their personal lives. So it was a light bulb moment for them. But as an organization, what we realized then is that we then had a platform for building the team level performance we were seeking, which is the high performance and the leadership. So that was really good for us, because then when we were allocating tasks or projects, we could say this person's top 5 strengths are this, they would be good for this project. So it wasn't just based on, oh, well, because they've worked, I don't know, doing medication for 3 years, they would be necessarily good at it. Somebody else might be better. So we were drawing from their strengths as well as their skills and their interest. And that's when we started seeing the high performance take effect. And, they felt empowered, they felt fulfilled, they felt they could do more. And as a result, they then went the extra mile, which is important in the kind of sector that we're in, because if you lead well, then the people around you will thrive. And for people who are vulnerable adults in our care, we are change agents. So it's important that that transformation can be at its utmost for people who are transitioning from the hospital to the community and then finally independent living. So StrengthsFinder was a game changer for us. And we then made it part of our culture by making it part of the onboarding process. So when new recruits come to the company, there's usually a member of staff there to act as a champion and ambassador for them. And they will walk through the StrengthsFinder process with them, as well as the trainer. And after that, they get a mug. I actually brought it with me. It's a mug.
Love it, love it, love it.
This is my mug, and it lists your top 5 strengths.
Tell us your top 5 strengths then on that one. What's
Yeah, I
listed
can
on?
read it out. So you probably won't be surprised. Futuristic, learner, positivity, maximizer, and achiever. So this is what people walk away with. It's almost like saying, we've picked a bit of your DNA. So this is what you need to remember as you're, just about yourself. So that became part of our onboarding process. And, we've not looked back since then. It's part of, I would say, it's Curado's modus operandi now.
Fabulous. And I love it. So it's almost like a 3-step thing. So it was that first injection of team strengths coaching that we did for everyone within the organization. Then I love the fact, and that's something so inspiring for a lot of leaders who might be listening to this, is that you took it 5 steps ahead internally within your organization. Job allocation, performance reviews. I remember developing the competency framework. We embedded it there as well. So it was literally living and breathing. And that's so important, because from a neurological angle, often what happens is that we learn new skills, but then we forget about it. But
Mhm.
it's all around us. You practice it, and then it becomes a habit. And
That's
that's
right.
when that neuroplasticity happens, whereby there are new synaptic connections happening, neurogenesis is taking place, and then it becomes the way we are, i.e., playing to our strengths, which is absolutely, absolutely brilliant on that
Yeah.
one. In fact, we've got Charles here, of course, and Charles has recently done his Strengths Finder at this wonderful transition point of your career. Do you want to give a soundbite about how you've experienced it,
Well,
Charles?
the Strengths Finder was a bit of a breath of fresh air, really. I spent many years bouncing between jobs when I was 17 to 21, and I never got given that sort of a foundation where you could look and see what your strengths were. They're always unnoticed for me. So I think the Strengths Finder is just such a good personalization for you to like. It describes who you are without even you knowing. And therefore, like, because everyone wants to be successful when they go into a business, and everyone wants to be, to do their boss proud, but you don't really know what you want until you have the Strengths Finder. You don't really know how to be successful, and like that was the thing that as soon as it comes to me, I took to it like a duck to water. It is really good. I mean, that is what I'd say about it.
Fantastic. Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why we include both of these topics in the Ascent Leadership Mastery program, which is a program that we offer to scale ups. We are a selection of experts and coaches, and we offer a variety of tools. And two of the ones that we absolutely adore is one is the Strengths Finder, which we use to really develop teams and leaderships to build up that kind of a culture so you become a high performing culture. But also a lot of work that we do around purpose because it then gives people clarity. The values and purpose gives them that clarity because, hey, let's face it, in today's world, we need ourselves to be individually as well as at a team level and an organization level, we need far more
Yeah.
resilience. And resilience comes from when you're clear about your values, your strengths, you're playing to your purpose as well. All of that, when they combine and come together, it's quite magical. And truly, I think so. Then individuals start leading themselves, the communities they lead in, them work in, with a huge difference to their own personal and mental well-being and happiness levels. So there's no compromise taking place there as well, which is one of our purposes at Ascent Leadership Mastery, which is creating leaders who are really leaders. And when we say use the word leaders in Ascent, we mean everyone is a leader, not just those with role titles. Everyone who's a leader can play to their strengths and play to their purpose as well. So that's something that we're really passionate about. And I'm absolutely delighted that actually Yvonne is one of the people who is part of the business mentors part of the team for Ascent Leadership Mastery. And we're going to be talking about an interesting subject that she focuses on. But before we do that, I just want to very briefly touch upon the fact that after the intervention that we worked with the team, Yvonne, you and I did a few hours of executive coaching one-to-one, creating that space for you to really uh, understand where is it that you're going and level up your own game, so as to speak. I wonder whether you have any reflections on what happened. I know I do have some reflections, but I'd love you to reflect about what it meant for you to create that space for yourself to
Yes.
grow as a leader in person.
Yeah, we finally got there because I remember from the very beginning, you talked about what about yourself? And I said, let me sort out my team first, and then I'll be rest assured I can work on myself. But when we finally got there, I think having gone through all the different hoops with my team, which was actually made this, I think, a richer experience. What it did for me is that it gave me a deeper understanding of myself in the sense that I learned about which strengths I was using more. I knew what my strengths were, but I wasn't really understanding how I used them. So I learned that. And I learned about the values that drive me and that how these contribute to the triggers that make me act or react as a leader. You talked about anabolic and catabolic a bit earlier. I think that was a real eye opener. So that's what it did for me. It just gave me that deeper level of understanding and awareness as well.
Fabulous. And that's always the step one, as you correctly said. Most of the clients that I work with are already high performing as you were.
Mm.
But it's really about the level of intervention that we work in Ascent is to really empower high performing leaders to become transformational.
Mhm.
That's our purpose. That's the space that we get excited about. And self awareness is the number one tool because then the leaders realize, oh, that's the reason why I'm so high performing. So let me
Mhm.
dial up certain things or maybe dial down a few blind spots so that, you're operating at a far higher level of transformational kind of personally as well as with businesses. But also, I think so. What was quite interesting is when we were having these conversations about we started exploring a little bit around your own career.
Mm.
And I remember we talked about portfolio career. Do you remember that?
Vaguely. Yes.
And you were kind of almost saying that now I want to expand my portfolio career.
Right.
Means that often what we've also seen in high performing leaders is that they've got so much of talent, expertise, wisdom, as well as appetite. They just don't want to be managing their business. They want to
Mm.
do other things, which is why you were already doing, and you've dialed up the whole thing about being a non-executive director on different boards, really following your passion. If you remember that coffee shop
Yes.
chat that
Yes.
we talked about,
Yes.
really aligning to some of the things that you dreamt about having a coffee shop, and now you're sitting in the board level of a particular organization that deals in that sector. So it's really developing yourself and having
Mm.
a portfolio career, which is something that you worked upon. So That was also something which was beautiful to watch you in your own transition. uh, I'd like to kind of switch topics a little at this moment of time, Yvonne, if I may, is to really kind of open doors on a conversation, which I know that you bring a lot of value in the Ascent Leadership Mastery program, which is about strategy, organization development, and specifically on the topic of customer centricity. And the
Mhm.
reason why I really want us to talk a little bit about it is, one is, of course, your ability to reframe the subject and to look at slightly differently, dialing up certain things which can be game changers and maybe looking at things differently. And it's so important today, I think so, for us to redefine customer centricity. So, could I invite you to share some thoughts about this particular subject, which I think is going to be very valuable for our listeners as well as for the clients with Ascent Leadership Mastery?
Sure. I think customer centricity is basically a culture of doing business that creates the best experience for the customer, which ultimately builds brand loyalty. Now, many people would have heard of the term "the customer is always right." And that actually came from American pioneer retailers at the turn of the century, one of whom is the founder of Selfridges, Harry Gordon Selfridge. And he always said, the customer is always right, but people misunderstood it as meaning that, oh, you have to listen to what the customer says. But what he actually meant was that it's important to listen. So, sorry, customer complaints should be taken seriously so that a customer does not feel deceived or cheated, but they actually feel they've been heard so that you can understand their needs and go the extra mile. So, in a business like Curado, which is a service based business, people would think, okay, the customer is the clients in our care home, which is one of our customers. But the way we look at it is that we have several customers. So, we have a multidimensional approach to customer centricity. So, obviously, we're looking after vulnerable adults, they are the first customer. But we also have a second customer who are our employees, and that's critical because the experience of the employees will have an effect on who they talk to about the business. So we have a lot of referrals that come in for people wanting to work, and sometimes they will say, well, I was recommended by this person. And we have the finder's fee thing in our organization, and that's good because if we weren't a good organization, our staff would not be saying, oh, come and work at Curado. So that's another customer. Also, that particular customer is an advocate for the business. When they're talking to social workers, because they're on the front line, they're talking to doctors, psychiatrists, mental health nurses. They are the ones who will actually say, your client has done so well, and we believe this can be achieved now. And, you give that person that confidence about what the actual service has done. And what happens? They make a referral and say, well, you know what? I have another patient that I want to come to your care service. So those are customers. I talked about the healthcare and health and social care professionals we work with. They're another kind of customer because ultimately they look at everything from, is our service effective? Is it responsive? Is it safe? Various different aspects that our regulators look at as well. So they're another customer. Our regulators, the regulatory body that we are regulated by, the Care Quality Commission, they're another customer. And also the relatives of our residents are customers. And so the way in which we try to triangulate all of this is basically we have a quality assurance system which enables us to send out surveys on a periodic basis to all these different customers to find out what experience they have had of our care service. And that helps us determine if we're going to change things or we're going to leave things as they are. And this is what Harry Gordon Selfridge was saying. It's about listening to a customer's needs to know exactly what they want. And, if you can go the extra mile, and going the extra mile is very important in a care service, So that's the way we look at customer centricity. It's not just the immediate, obvious customer. It's other people who are part of their care in our case.
Fantastic. And such an important point that I find when I hear your narrative right now, and so important, I think, so for scale ups, because sometimes you see some of this in larger organizations. So the depth of it, I would probably question, is that when you're doing the stakeholder mapping for your
Mm-hmm.
customers, one of the key segments that you highlight is that of the employees,
Yes.
which then connects back to what kind of culture are you creating for employees, which
Mm-hmm.
then becomes almost the culture of customer centricity, because you're kind of really treating your internal customers in a way that then cascades out in your customers, who are your regulators, your suppliers, because obviously all the employees are connecting with them, plus the actual clients who are coming through your door are
Mm-hmm.
experiencing a very different kind of a vibe. And
Sure.
that's really important for scale ups, I think. Would you agree, Yvonne? Because when you're a startup, everything is small and manageable. But when you start scaling up, how do you scale up that small feeling of togetherness that you had in a small team when you hit
Mm.
100 plus? Is that
Yeah.
you nodding? Do you agree on that one, or
I
do you have a counter?
totally. And I think when you scale up, that's a test of your leadership, because it's
Nice,
easy to manage one care home, for example, where it's all nice and hunky dory. But how do you manage two, three, four, five, six, or 10, or how many ever it is? That's a test of your leadership and the test of your management as well. The business that, and what should happen is the let's use the employee as the customer. They should be saying the same thing in unit one as the customer employee does in unit two and unit three. They should all be singing from the same hymn sheet. And that's how you know that you've got the right formula.
nice, nice, absolutely nice. And there's another thing that you mentioned that I want to tease off before we start closing today's conversation. Is you talked about customer is listening to customer complaints in a
Yes.
far more effective way, and it brought back a reflection that we had in an earlier conversation of ours, that sometimes business owners think they know what the customer wants.
Hmm.
They create solutions which they think, because they like, that's what the customer wants.
Hmm.
But sometimes listening to customer complaints can help them realize that maybe they don't know what the customer wants. And it
Oh.
gives them an opportunity to bring a service or an offering or a product which is far more tuned into what the client or customer needs. I
Mhm.
wondered whether have there been, and I know I'm just asking this extempore, but have there been any such realizations for you while you're working with your wide customer base? It could be account management,
Um,
whatever.
Trying to think. Nothing too significant in that. Well, I shouldn't say that, because everything is important that we do it, no matter how big or how small. But I would say that the main structure of what we do is on the right path, because as a business person, you do your research before you go into business to know
Nice.
if there's a market there, first and foremost. But things can change. And I would say that one of the things that has changed in the business environment which Curado operates in is there has been a need for more supported living services as opposed to residential care services. And for those who don't understand the difference, I'll just explain. So we started with one and then unit two, which are 24-hour care homes, and that's high support. So people who come from hospital need that intensive support. But what happened was, when our clients left us, they moved to a provider of lower support, which is classed as supported living. Now, what we realized over the years is that, having prepared all these wonderful individuals to live on their own, we were in the best position to actually create that next service. And
Nice.
the demand was increasing for that. So that's how we moved into that kind of arena. In a different sense as well, we have residence meetings for our clients every 6 weeks, and they may say, you know what, I don't really like what's on the menu. So we're not going to give them, we have menus per week, week one, week two, week three. It's on a 4 weekly basis. Now, if you have somebody that comes in with different dietary needs, you need to change the menu. So that's an example of listening to a need. It's not necessarily a complaint, as you had said, but it's understanding, because at the end of the day, the care plans we create are they are client centered care plans That's another aspect of customer centricity. They talk in the NHS and social care, they talk a lot about patient centered care or client centered care. That is customer centricity, and that's key, because if you don't have that, what service are you delivering? So these are just examples.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Very nice.
I'm
What?
trying to think of a random thing. I think one survey that we got back, I think somebody said, oh, it would be nicer if we were closer to, I don't know, a restaurant or something. This is one of our patients. Now, obviously, we can't change the location of our service. We know that we are where there are lots of local amenities, but that's just somebody thinking, well, it would be nice if I had this. It's not saying that our service was necessarily bad. But yeah, I mean, I would say that Curado is a conscious business, Rena. And what I mean by that is that we're a learning organization. So we have that culture of learning and leading, and we're always revamping ourselves through continuous professional development in order to transform ourselves and adapt to the changing needs of our clients and also the business environment.
And what a fabulous piece of work you and your team are doing. And I kind of almost feel at this moment of time, I must say congratulations and thank you, because you're actually really a great company, which is an example of profit with purpose. So
Thank you
it's
very
while
much.
you're really growing, but it's also such a purposeful business. And not surprisingly, because at the helm, we have a very purposeful leader, which is you. So kudos and well done. And I'm sure we're going to stay connected on this one, on this conversation. And I love the little reframe that you gave to me right a few minutes ago, is that actually every customer, what we call complaint, is not a complaint. It's actually a need that they are expressing. And so if people were to not look at customer complaints as complaints, but look at it as a need that they're voicing, then
Mhm.
perhaps they might come up with businesses which are far more customer centric or patient centric, as you were mentioning in the NHS. Fantastic. That's great. Some really golden nuggets out there for our listeners on how you could reframe and fine tune and sharpen customer centricity. I feel I want to kind of move towards wrapping up today's conversation, and I'd love your view. I'd like you to put on. I know you're a business mentor to the Ascent Leadership Mastery program that we've been talking about, but I'd like you to put the hat on of a business owner who has
Mhm.
been going through scale up. And from that viewpoint, if you were to look at the program that we have devised for scale ups, why do you think that they should consider it? Do you have any thoughts around it as a business owner?
Yeah, I do. I think that every scale up should do this, because when you start a business, the position you're in from when you start a business to when you build your business is very different. And what the Ascent Leadership does is it brings clarity to the purpose and mission of your organization, which surprisingly many founders or stroke owner managers, they may not have not clearly defined it from the onset, but they may have lost it along the way. And it just brings you back to basics to understand, why am I doing this and where do I really want to go? Because your positioning changes as you learn, when it's a paper exercise on a business plan to execution to development, you're going through different stages in your business life cycle. So I think it's important for any scaling business to do this. Also, it enables you to look at the tools that are needed to scale a business whilst maintaining that entrepreneurial drive, as that's really the challenge to scaling a business. And
Mm.
also, you're bringing new actors into the equation when you scale a business. That could be new staff, new customers, new partners, suppliers, maybe new investor stakeholders. So the Ascent Leadership is really a back to the drawing board, but not back to the beginning in that sense. It's back to the drawing board of the new phase that you're going into, so that you can really scale and ascend the way you want, in a, whether it's meaningful, purposeful, it's in a way that's sustainable.
So important, sustainable. That's something that we are really passionate about at Ascent. And thank you for sharing those words, because they strike a chord with me at many, many levels. Because the program, which, as I mentioned, is all have got experts, you've got coaches, mentors, trainers. What we're really hoping to do, and we've seen it time and again, is not just trigger the growth of an organization at scale up, but then make it sustainable, so that
Hmm,
it really sustains and the momentum is there where every individual is thriving and the teams are thriving and the businesses are thriving and they're making a real difference to the communities
that's
around
right.
them.
That's
So
right.
fantastic words there from you, Yvonne. It's been absolutely a delight to have this conversation. I could pretty much carry on, but I do know that I'm getting signals from Charles to start thinking about wrapping up today's conversation. And I'm also very conscious of the time of our listeners as well. So, Charles, over to you for the next minute
Okay.
to wrap up today's conversation.
Beautiful. Well, thank you everyone for tuning into today's episode. I hope you've enjoyed the topic. If you have any questions, comments, please leave them below as we love to hear your feedback. Additionally, if you want to email us, the address you'll use is hello@rinadeal.com. We look forward to hearing from you. In the next episode on the 28th of June, will be a deep dive in one of the key topics in a new program launched by Maria and Rina called Mastering Peak Performance. This episode will be exploring how we can use our brain much more effectively. If you want to tune into the episode, please place a placeholder in your diary for 28th of June at 12 p.m. London time. I'd like to thank you all again, and one last time, thank you to our speakers.
Thank you so much, Charles. That's absolutely fantastic. Yes, do put a placeholder for 28th June. We're going to be joined by Trade Nation's Head of Finance, Robin, as well as the CEO, Neil, who are going to be talking about really some of the fantastic concepts and tools that they're putting into place in their organization, which is a fintech sector organization, and helping leaders and teams accelerate and master peak performance, which, as Charles mentioned, is an exciting new program that we're going to be launching in autumn, which is going to be an open house program. So thank you very much for that, Charles. And Yvonne, absolutely, once again, a huge thank you. I'm sure we're going to stay connected. And for all our viewers, thank you for joining Charles and myself. It's been an absolute joy.
Thank you,
Take
Rini.
care.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye.